Welcome all to today's session on 10 secrets for thrifty grocery shopping for nutritious meals. Before we get started, I'd like to mention some upcoming webinars. On Wednesday, April 26th, we're going to have our financial webinar this month is going to be on understanding workplace benefits. So whether or not you're in a private or governmental work setting, we're going to talk about some of the different, kind of a broad discussion on some of the different benefits that you may or may not have and ways that you might take advantage of them. Also on May 4th, we've got a guest speaker, Daryl Rosenthal, who's actually with the Social Security Administration. And so he's going to talk about a lot of the different things related to Social Security to maximize your benefits and rules. And then next month's nutrition webinar is a great follow-up for today's, which is about making more healthy meals at home. And then on Thursday, June 1st, we'll be talking about dining out. Just want to remind you who we are. We're part of the Extension Service for the nationwide outreach from your local land-grant university, and it reaches out to bring the research education from the university level down to the local level. And here in Florida, it's related to the University of Florida as well as Florida A&M, and all 67 counties in Florida have an extension presence, and most have a family and consumer sciences agent, which is what our webinar team is. I'm Julie England. I'm based out of Seminole County. Our other primary speaker today is Wendy Lynch, who is in Putnam County. Also, Jamila Lepore, who's based in Hillsborough County. And our specialist up at the university level is Dr. Wendy Dahl. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you do not see a box over on the right side of your screen, please click on the little red arrow and it'll expand. If you'd like to keep that box open during the entire webinar, just right-click it and unclick the auto-hide check mark, and it'll keep it open so you can see the chat box. And also, as we go through, we encourage you to chat messages, ideas, things that you're doing. Makes it more interesting to everybody. You can enter it in. You can send it to the entire audience, or you can send it to Wendy or I. There's a materials box that has 6 materials for today's program, including the slide set, the slide handout, so you can print it out or save it to refer to. And I mentioned the chat box. A little bit later today, we'll be emailing you a very short evaluation. It really is short. It's about 2 minutes max to fill out. It's really important to us that you fill it out and send it back to us. And the sooner you send it back, then you won't get any reminding, nagging emails from us reminding you to fill it out. So let's talk about ideas to help you improve your grocery shopping habits. So we do have 10 of them today. And so the number one is to think about how much you actually have to spend. Consider if you're using it widely, because knowing how much you have to spend can help you prioritize whether or not you're spending money on nutritious foods. So one of our main goals is to get you to think about what you're spending on food, but not just how much you're spending it, but how you're spending it. And so this is the most recent data I could find, but I think this is really kind of interesting to think about how people spend their food. And the general recommendation that we provide in Extension is that families trying to aim between 13 and 15% of their take-home pay to spend on food purchases. And that also includes beverages as well, but that's food purchase and beverages purchases that you buy for consuming in the home as well as what you eat out. But this is a really nice chart that kind of shows how people spend the percentage of money. So certainly lower income people, families, certainly make money, it'll make less money, but also their proportionate spending on food is 34%, which is a huge amount of your income to spend just on eating. And average middle income family does hit that 13 to 15% suggested recommendation, and certainly the higher incomes spend more money on food, but as a percentage of what they make, it's the lowest. But here's another kind of interesting chart, and it shows how you're spending, how the general American public, where they spend their money at home and away from home. And over time, we've seen this huge increase in how we spend how we purchase food away from home. So as we go through this presentation, we'd really like you to give some thought, not only what you're eating, but where you're spending your money as well. So some things that influence where we spend on food. Whether or not you're eating at home or away. If you're eating at home and cooking, generally you're going to be spending less money. Depends on what you cook. But also your shopping habits and your spending habits, who you're taking with you to the store. If on the way through the store, you've had to bring kids with you and they keep trying to run down the candy aisle and things like that, trying to get you more money, to spend more money on things you don't necessarily need, just that what they think they want or what they've actually seen advertised, since marketing has a huge influence on what we spend, particularly with children. Food preparation skills, which of course we're going to be talking about some next month. Also, and I find this, I know I'm really familiar with this, the convenience food versus the time you have spending preparing. So I mentioned previously also about income, how much you have, but also food prices in your community and also availability of food in your community. We've heard the term food deserts, and a lot of times people think of food deserts just as in urban areas where there's really only the local convenience store to buy food, and what's there is not very healthy, but also you get into rural areas and they're food deserts too. I was in the boondocks of Wyoming one year and I heard somebody nearby say to me, oh, life was good if you were near a Walmart supercenter. And I thought, well, that seemed a little odd to me. And then the next day when we had to drive 60 miles over high desert to get to the town where the supercenter was, I realized how right she was, because in that little town, the only grocery store was basically a little store that was about 1.5 times the normal convenience store. So that would have been an area that was somewhat food deserty. And this is also kind of another interesting graphic to think about where our money goes. You'll notice this is how basically your food dollar is spent, where it goes. And you'll notice that only about a little over 10% actually goes towards the production, farm production, the production of our food, and that 32, almost 33% of it is spent on things that are done for producing food services, things that go for eating food away from home. So I just thought it was a great kind of shot, because people think that farmers, are making all this money, but really the actual cost of our food and producing it is very small, considering the processing, packaging, retail costs and things like that. So think about how you spend your money, but one of the first things is knowing where you spend it. And the way that you can spend that figure that out is to track your food spending. And so we do this for all financial programs, but really think about tracking your food spending for the next 2 weeks. And that's writing down anything that you purchase, whether out of the home, or all your grocery shopping or your emergency buys on the way home at your local quick market. So think about write down what you spend and where you spend it, because I think you'll be surprised. Because one of the things is we just run to that grocery store to buy that quart of milk that you forgot, and you end up with other things. So track your spending for 2 weeks, and then think about where you spent it, what you bought, were there things that you bought that you're willing to go without? Because this will help you decide so if you're spending a lot of money, for example, on sugared beverages and not buying enough fruits and vegetables, to think about doing a switch. But also to think about, did you run out of food and you had to go make those quick runs? But also, did you also spend money on food that were left over at the end of the month that you wasted? Stuff that's spoiled because it grew mold and things like that, or you just threw out that you were bored with. So think about all these things, and really we do highly encourage you just to track your spending for 2 weeks, because you'll be surprised. And to help you, you got to create a plan.
So the second tip, or I guess our second secret to thrifty grocery shopping, is planning ahead. And to start planning your meals for the week, you really want to see what you have on hand first. Next slide, please. So what you want to have on hand, well, we look at, I love to see this slide. On the right-hand side, we see this beautiful organized pantry. Not a lot of ingredients in there, but then you look on the pantry on the left, and this might look like more of what we might have at home. But take a really good look at this pantry and tell me, what do you notice in here? And type that in the chat box. Not organized, yep. Trying to make my chat box a little bit bigger. So, okay, not
looks like mine. It kind of looks like mine too.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not alone in that. But what we did want to identify in this is that there's multiple of the same item in here. So this is the importance of really starting with surveying the scene, see what you have on hand. So this means checking your refrigerator, your freezer, your pantry, your cupboard, wherever you store your meals with, or your foods within the home, you want to check and see what you have on hand, because this is really going to help you plan your meals around the foods that you already have, helping, again, to keep that cost down.
Also, one of the things is down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's about 7 bags of pecans. And pecans are expensive. But pecans also have a shelf life. So here we are with expensive food that should be in our freezer as well.
So by keeping it organized, actually, how do you guys organize your pantry? I know a couple of you said yours looks like the one on the left, but if you look at it closely, they do have soups and broths organized. They've got dressings together. Looks like there's some beans. The tomato products are a little all over the place. But they do have it somewhat organized. Does anybody have a tip for organizing pantries at home?
One of the things when I look at it, there's a lot of soups, and depending on how much soups you have, whether or not it's taking up space that you could be using for other things.
Right. All right. Next slide. So this is a great handout for you guys to use. This is from Nebraska Extension, and it's just a general list for some common items of basics to keep on hand that'll help you prepare for meals, so you don't go to prepare a recipe and not have some of those staples or basics. And that was one of the, I believe that was in the materials section. If not, the link is down below. It helps you to be prepared for those meals. How many of us have ever been in the kitchen preparing a meal thinking you have all the ingredients, come to realize that that one ingredient you needed, that one common or basic item, is not there? Using My Plate as a guide is extremely important for planning your meals. So we want them to be a healthful meal, but we also want to be on a budget as well. So we'll give you some tips on how to do that. So when planning your meals, you want to start with variety. We eat with our eyes, so tons of color. We know that with different colors, there's different nutrients. We also want to select foods that are going to be nutrient dense. So when we say nutrient dense, basically for the calories that you're eating, you're getting a ton of vitamins and minerals, different nutrients that are going to benefit you. Also look for foods that are fiber rich, those things that are going to keep you full longer. And another great one, which is probably a hard one for a lot of us, is just eating the recommended amount. So oftentimes we eat so much more of one food group versus another that following the recommended amounts not only is going to make us more helpful, but it's also has a potential for reducing down our food budget. So next is planning with the food groups and the My Plate messages. Make half of your plate fruits and vegetables. So I know we typically plan our meals. Well, actually, let me ask you guys, what's the first thing you think about when you're planning your meals? What type of food? Which one of the food groups? type that in the chat box. So which food group do you use?
We have meat, we have protein.
Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing that on my end. So,
I know, you
okay,
have to
so
keep
meat and
scrolling
protein.
down and keep scrolling up.
Okay.
So
All
put
right. So,
protein and vegetables.
oh, well, good to see the veggies because we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But again, with that particular, you want to try to start making, kind of shifting our mindset a little bit and planning with our fruits and veggies first, particularly the veggies, because that's the biggest portion that we need. And when you're planning the veggies, don't forget those subgroups. So that means, again, the color. So you've got your red and orange, you've got dark green, your beans and peas. So there's all sorts of varieties that you can choose to make up your meals. Also keep in mind, with the fruits and veggies, you can also purchase canned or frozen. But when you're purchasing the can, make sure you're looking for that low sodium or no sodium added or no salt added. And with the fruits, again, with the no added sugars there. For the protein, think about adding animal and plant sources, not just our animal products. And jump real quick back to the grains. One thing I didn't mention on the grains is making half of the grains that you eat whole grains. Great way that you can reduce costs on that is if you're purchasing bread, go to a day-old bread store or like a bread store specific, or even go into a bakery that has day-old bread. Of course, you're looking for whole grains to help keep it healthful, but there's all sorts of ways that you can cut back. And with dairy, you can use a non-fat milk, dry milk. That's another substitute. And what's cheaper? Is it less expensive to purchase a half a gallon or a gallon milk? In most cases, it's going to be the gallon. You're going to get more bang for your buck that way than just the half a gallon. So we wanted a special slide with the protein simply because the meat portion is typically your most expensive portion, and this is where those portion sizes really come into play, which is going to help you to keep that cost low or lower and not exceed your protein requirements for the day. So for most adults, according to the dietary guidelines, is in between that 5 to 7 ounces of meat. So if you're consuming much more protein than what you actually need, that's a great opportunity to focus on the veggies. Not only can you get fresh vegetables at your different farmers markets, which Julie's going to talk about a little bit later, but it's a great way to improve your dietary quality. For the protein sources, don't just think meat. Again, think some of your plant sources, also tofu, any veggie options. Nuts are included, and as well as canned fish and some canned meats. To maintain your healthy plate on a budget, planning is absolutely the key to being successful. Anyone that's ever tried to improve their diet, if you don't plan, my husband always says, if you don't plan to fail to plan, plan to fail. And that's so true, especially when it comes to preparing a meal or your menu. So when you're trying to start out, if this is a new practice for you, try planning for an entire week, especially the week during the weekdays that you're really busy and on the go and less likely to have the extra time to prepare meals. So planning ahead is really important. I love the create a collection of go-to meals. We are creatures of habits, so we eat a lot of the same foods. So what you can do is make your own recipe book and keep the collection of recipes that your family really likes in that book, so you're not scrambling each week to trying to figure out something new to cook. And one other tip is to cook once and eat a bunch. Maybe not just 2 times, but maybe 3 times, 4 times. And, really stretch your food dollar. So if you prepare chicken, a huge baked pan of chicken, there's so many different ways you can use that chicken, except, as opposed to just using it as a whole piece of protein. Shred it up, put it into a sandwich, make a stir fry, a casserole. So it can really, again, helps to keep that portion size at a good amount or the appropriate amount, as well as stretching that food dollar. And your recipes don't always have to be cooked. I'm a big fan of a salad or sandwich because it's easy. You may not want to do that all the time just to try to make sure you're getting the nutrients that you need. but planning it, that is part of planning. So when you're planning your meals, think of all of these different ways. So whether it's you're going to stretch your food dollar, it's going to be a no-cook meal, or it's going to be a planned snack, you know, whatever it is for you, planning is key. So here are two different planning tools that I really like to use personally. The one on the right-hand side, the Iowa State University, the 5-day meal planning worksheet is fantastic. It's from their Spend Smart, Eat Smart. Definitely check out that website. There's a ton of information there. But if you can see on there, and if you didn't already download the material, it's there. So the 5-day planning worksheet, if you look on the left-hand side, it'll have like a little notepad almost where you can put all of the foods that you have on hand or some of the common foods that you might need. This, again, is helping you to plan out your meals for that week. You want to use what you have. So one, either you don't purchase something you already have, and two, you use it before it expires. Then down at the very bottom, if you notice it says, how did I do? It's got each of the different food groups, so you can kind of do a self-check on, kind of rate your plate and see, well, what did my day look like? Did I get all of the food groups? Because there's days that I know that I've tracked personally, and I thought, you know, I teach this often, and I went all day and I haven't had a vegetable yet because I didn't plan. So again, it's a great self-check in keeping that a healthy meal. Also, aside from these, there's tons of printables online that you can pull. I know there's Excel files that you can print out your meals or do the meal planning, and of course on Pinterest there's a load of different types of worksheets for meal planning. So as I mentioned before, you can create your own cookbook. Keep that on hand. You know, you might have some cookbooks on the shelf that you haven't looked at in a while. Grab one of those down. You know, there's all sorts of sources that you may have available to you at home, or even, of course, online. There's quite a bit there. Even checking out the library. Even if you Google also, you can stay on this slide, Julie, but even if you Google online or go online and do an internet search for healthy recipes on a budget, there's endless amounts of recipes. So, and one good resource is the next one we're going to show, which is the What's Cooking. And this is the USDA Mixing Bowl, which is a really neat website. I like this personally simply because if thinking back to that pantry where we had all of the pecans, you know, in my cabinet, I tend to have a lot of pasta because I buy it not realizing I already had it. So now I can jump in the search box, in that search recipes, type in pasta, and on the next slide it's going to show you. So I typed in pasta, and this is just the you know, it says 19 results, and it gives me different healthful recipes that are budget friendly that can use that one ingredient that I have. I like it gives the prep amount of time, and you can even rate the recipe as well. But a really great resource. All right, so we have our meals planned, and now we are ready to write our grocery list. So with our making our list, you're going to see that this is intended for our list is to keep us on track, purchase what we need, and avoid impulse buys. Here's two examples, the Create a Grocery Game Plan, which is from the USDA, the ChooseMyPlate.gov, and then also the same, the Spend Smart, Eat Smart. And both of those, if you'll notice, they're arranged by food groups. There's also, if you know what store you're going to, it's also really beneficial to go ahead and list your foods by aisle. Another option is there's new apps, which we're going to show you a couple on the next page, but one of the most important parts, sticking to the list. Don't buy off the list, because if you buy something that's not on your list, you have just gone over your food budget. You're buying things that you don't quite need. All right, so Iowa State has a brand new app. There's a blog on it just recently, so we are super excited to be able to share this with you guys. I've got it on my phone right now, and as I'm pulling it up, when you look at it, it's got a recipe of the month, baked fish and chips. Again, this is going to be really cost-effective and nutritious foods recipes available. They have a tip of the week. They've got videos that are going to show you not only like food prep, it's going to give you easy recipes, food safety, storage, food shopping, has a calculator, which Julie's going to cover a little bit about a calculator for unit pricing. So a great resource. Please take some time to check that out. Very beneficial because some of the work's already done for you, the nutrition information as well as some of the cost. So here's just a few apps. I just did a search for these, you know, for Android phones as well as Apple. And has anyone tried an app that they use now that maybe they really like or found to be successful with? I know my husband and I had to go to an app simply because we had the traditional pen and paper and we put it on the fridge, which often a lot of folks will do. And, you know, as we're running out, we write it on the list. But then I get to the store and guess what? I forgot my list. So I do use one of the apps that are listed here, our grocery shopping list, because I put the app on both phones. And so he can add things to the list as he thinks of them and it syncs. So when I pull my list up, his added groceries or added items that he needs will be on that list as well. And it's always with me. So I typically always have my phone. So in that case, I have my list. So everydollar.com has a great budgeting app. Oh, that's nice. I hadn't seen one for budgeting. I'll have to check that one out. Thank you.
So and as we go through, if anybody has one, feel free to add it in. And then Jamila just put in, if you're not super techie, that would be me. I have a bunch of apps already. Just try using a shared note or Google spreadsheet. I'm more the whiteboard on the refrigerator type, but that's what works for my family. But say when Wendy was talking about, when we were talking yesterday and Wendy was talking about how it's synced between her husband and she and her husband, it's like, wow, that is great.
And it's, again, it's really helpful for us because I always forget the list. But Julie, when you do use the whiteboard, how do you transfer it to paper?
Which is the next list. But yes, we have a whiteboard that's got a magnet on the back that we bought at one of the office supply places. It's up on our refrigerator, and we just write things on it then and there. And then I use it when I make the grocery list. But I am a little bit more, but I'm not particularly high tech. So somebody's just put, oh, Jamila just put, my husband and I just use the yellow notepad on the iPhone. That's true. And then they can both edit it. So it's easy without an app.
Excellent. And I guess too, if you're using the whiteboard, you can always just take a photo of it and you'll have it on your phone. That way. Yes, I know. But you know what? It keeps me from having to rewrite it twice. So,
but also if you have family members too with, for example, kids, and it makes them accountable if they haven't added what they need when they're complaining that you didn't buy them the such and such that they wanted, that it's like, well, you should have put it on a whiteboard. Teaches some accountability among the family.
I know. I don't think my husband cares for it when I say, oh, you didn't buy this. It's like, oh, it wasn't on the app. All right. So moving on to discounts, sales, and coupons. So there's all sorts of ways that we can save some money as long as we're sticking to that list we just mentioned. So some of the discounts and sales that you see, there's actual discount stores. Like I mentioned the bread store earlier. You may have a kind of a scratch and dent place that you might pick up a few of non-perishable items, but making sure that there's not extreme dents in those cans, because for food safety purposes, just as a sidebar. Loyalty cards. You know, a lot of stores want you to come back and purchase their products, and they're going to reward you in some way, whether it's points or coupons or a percentage off. Those loyalty cards do keep you coming back. Sometimes we have X amount of cents off gas per dollar we use. Is there any other loyalty cards that are new that maybe offer something that I didn't mention? If so, type it in the chat box because that'll be new for me too. Newspapers. Newspaper is a traditional way to find those coupons, what's on sale, look for those store circulars. Usually once you identified whatever store it is that you use, it comes out usually midweek, depending upon the store.
Somebody mentioned the new Plenty card. I know that one of the big grocery stores just switched to that. And somebody mentioned Baby Club, and something to think about these loyalty cards is there's certainly benefits of it, and then they send you specialized coupons, but also think about whether it matters to you or not, whether or not somebody's tracking your spending. So they're so because they're, for example, if you're buying a lot of baby items at the baby store, they're sending you coupons that are specific to you. But whether or not you want people to know that, it's up to you. And somebody put, if a store runs out of a product while on sale, yes, be sure to get a rain check, because it seems like something that my husband's cottage cheese, apparently everybody in our town loves that one particular cottage cheese, and every time it's on sale, they're out.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point though. But if you're asking for that rain check, they're going to honor that sale item when it gets back in stock, and that's a great way to save money. Looking at the manufacturer's coupons, there is, well, I guess we're going into coupons in a separate slide, but so I'll hold that off. But buy one, get ones, only buy those if you're really going to use it. Is it on your list? Is it on one of those staple items that you had on your pantry list that you need to keep on hand? But I love the second line here. It says, ask yourself, is it on sale, but do I really need it? Are you buying it? It's kind of like when you purchase clothes because it's on sale and it's still in your closet with a tag. You know, you're wasting money that way. So here's the coupons. There's coupon slide. There is a really good handout by Ohio State University Extension, and it's couponing tips and saving money with coupons. A lot more detailed information on how you can stack the coupons. One idea is look for exchanges. I know our senior center and community center, they have a big, huge basket where everyone just brings their extra coupons in. You go through, take what you want, put what you don't want in there. So it's just kind of an open market exchange, I guess, for coupons. So in store, they have the Catalinas, and those are the ones that are the coupons that are printed on your receipt. Ask your particular store if they accept coupons from another competitor. Oftentimes they do. There's mobile and digital coupons. If you go to, let's say, the manufacturer's website, oftentimes they have printable ones that you can print there. Use that manufacturer's coupon, and maybe there's a store coupon as well. Also the peelies, you guys know what I'm talking about, where you actually just peel it off the actual item. So there's a variety of different coupons that you can save money, but the key is only use a coupon for the items that you really need to purchase.
And one thing to think about if you're doing some of these online, the digital coupons, and like there's assorted couponing apps and things like that. I used one for a while, and they sent me 80 million, it seemed like, emails. So maybe you might think of having a separate email related to that. So that way you've got, which is really useful for a lot of things. So you've got your semi-junkish email going to one email address, and then the one that you're using more for regular business stuff, or or family stuff, is going to another one.
And Jamila put in on the chat box also, check the generic brands. Sometimes even with a national brand with the coupon is going to be more expensive than your store brand. So you just really have to do some comparison shops. So all right, we've got our meal plans, we've got our grocery list, now we're ready to shop. What are some of your tips that you use when shopping? I know a couple of you mentioned about already with the rain checks, that's important to save money. What else can you do? We mentioned coupons. Any others? Discounted shelf. Oh, that's a good one too. Like on the end caps of aisles, oftentimes they will have things marked down. Look on those. It may not be consistent week to week. Go by yourself. Excellent.
But also a lot of times end caps may not be sales. They may just be a promotional item because if it's seasonal or whatever. So when you're looking at end caps, don't assume that it's a sale. Like anything else, be a savvy shopper.
Rosalind, that is so true. Don't go when you're hungry, because if you are hungry, everything looks good. That budget goes right out of the water.
The cheese calls to me when I'm hungry.
Shop on the last day of the store flyer. Ah, got it. That's a good one. All right, so time to shop again. So bring your grocery list. So if you don't have the paper version, maybe you took picture of it, or if it's on your app, on your phone or your notepad, make sure that list is there to help you. Again, this is keeping you on track, reminding you of the things that you need to purchase, and only purchase those things that are on your list. Mitch just mentioned that not going on an empty stomach. But the third one is, even though all of us are most likely busy, it's important to give yourself some time to do some comparison shopping, and see what item might be a little bit less. And like I said, Julie's going to go into that a little bit more. Shopping the perimeter of the store is where you're going to find your healthy choices. You know, I can't remember where I read it, but it says, just don't go there. You know, don't go down that aisle that's going to tempt you to buy all the lickies and chewies and the things that aren't the healthy choices and things that aren't really going to help you stay within your budget. And again, as I mentioned on a previous slide, stick to your list.
Alrighty. So let's talk about convenience. What do you think about convenience food? Is convenience, oops, had to make sure I wasn't unmute, I hadn't muted myself. Does convenience cost? What are your thoughts? What are some ways that you find convenience can save you money? It depends. Okay, I think that's a really good statement. Yes, it does depend. So first, one of the things to think about is comparison shopping. And when Wendy mentioned the Spend Smart, Eat Smart app, it does have some things to help you figure out your unit price and for comparison shopping. But it really kind of depends on what you're buying, whether or not, so here's 3 different labels from the shelves of a local store related to feta cheese, and there are 3 different kinds, and they are, first of all, they're all the name brand ones. So one of the first things that you might want to do is look for the store brand, but also it kind of depends on what you're going to use it for and what your health goals are. So we have 4 ounces of feta cheese crumbles, a chunk of feta cheese, and then reduced fat. And so our price per ounce, which it's so nicely spelled out for us on our on the labels, is from 66 cents an ounce to 88 cents an ounce. So if you were only doing a salad and you wanted just crumbles, and you can also buy reduced fat crumbles, I want to point out, but if you were just buying crumbles and you just needed 4 ounce, you would be better off to spend more per ounce and only buy, for $2.99, get your 4 ounces of crumbles versus, for example, I like to buy feta by the chunk because I use it in salads to bring to work. So I buy the chunk and I crumble it up myself so it's less expensive, or buy the lower fat one. But also think about, you know, what you need versus what you're using. So for example, I personally don't like mayonnaise. And so when I buy mayonnaise, I buy the smallest container because I'm making it maybe a specific salad versus somebody who likes mayonnaise who buys the less expensive per ounce big jar because they're using mayonnaise on a lot of different things. So, Ingrid uses her extra crumbles in the freezer and take out what she needs. Good idea. So, but do shop, look at prices. It's very nice that the stores do put this information so you can figure out and at least make an informed decision about what you want. So back to it depends on whether or not convenience costs. And part of it is how much time you have too. Because, you know, that old saying, time is money, better that you bought a convenience food and ate at home as opposed to going out, or a semi-convenience food. And I'm curious, has anybody ever purchased any of the ship it to your house already cut up kind of foods? So if you have, please chat in whether or not you like them, whether or not you thought it was worth the money. I was at a local grocery store recently, and they actually, in their meat department, you could tell that that's what they were trying to do. They had more meat over in their meat department. They had semi-ready to prepare foods that had the vegetables and the meat and stuff and directions. And it was $15, and I looked at one, and I'm not exactly sure how many portions that they were going to get out of them. It would depend on your family. But do think about the store brands versus the national brands. But also back to the nutrition facts, reading your nutrition facts label. I know we've mentioned this any number of times, but sometimes convenience foods are really what we consider a lot of the convenience foods are more highly processed, and they've added extra salt, fat, or whatever. And then there's convenience produce too. Whether or not you would be better off buying, if you don't want to fix vegetables, but if, for example, your kids will eat the baby carrots or things like that, you would be better off potentially to be spending a little bit more on the pre-cut produce versus not serving it all. But also, there's frozen food is highly convenient, and even canned, just realize that there's sodium added. But basic frozen vegetables are often quite inexpensive. We've gotten lazy, generally speaking, and we buy our frozen vegetables in the microwavable pouches because they're quick, they're easy. Um, let's see. Somebody put, I think that food is very good, but this has to do with the shipping food in. The food was good, but lots and lots of packaging waste. What are we adding to our landfills? They put their whole foods on the countertop for days, but as soon as they make a fruit salad, it's gone within days. So yes, a little bit of time on your part to make a fruit salad has increased the convenience of other family members in eating it. Individual cups versus portions, of course, and something else that convenience is when you're checking out or spending in general to look at the cash register or as you're checking out and make sure that things are being priced right as well. And I love this handout. This is from Main Extension. This is it's not in your materials, but you can get the link from the slide handout. It's like 20 pages or so, and it's got a lot of different varieties of different kind of homemade convenience mixes, including meat mixes that you can freeze in portions for making your own convenience foods. So spending a little bit of time, maybe one weekend a month, or even more often or less often, to do some of these packaging things like salad dressings, just making your own salad dressings can be a huge savings. You're using healthier ingredients, but this really is a great handout. I highly recommend it. Something that I know what they do with their leftover vegetables is they have a food dehydrator out, and anything left over, they just dehydrate. Most people probably aren't going to want to go through that, but if you do have a dehydrator, you can make fruit leathers, things like that. You can get recipes. You can go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, which is out of the University of Georgia. Just Google National Center for Home Food Preservation. They have a lot of information on freezing and dehydrating. But also, preparing and freezing batches of meals. If you're going to make spaghetti sauce, make extra, freeze it, any kind of other different things. It goes back to the cook once, eat twice, or 3 or 4 times even. And so here's just some tips, and we're going to be going to more of this on our next webinar, but some things to think about if you're going to be preparing freezer meals. So for casseroles, and remember that casseroles, things like that, especially if you're using preferably with healthy ingredients, are a great way to extend those proteins and cut down the cost of the proteins in our food. But if you freeze them before baking, especially when you have pre-cooked ingredients that you're putting into them, they're going to have better quality. But if you're using things like pasta, potatoes, or rice, not to cook them as you might normally cook them, you want them a little undercooked before you freeze them. But also, and is the portioning of food, when we were talking about portion control being good for your wallet and your waste, is if you freeze the meals and portions right for your family, or freeze them in individual portions for quick lunches that you could just go and pull out a freezer lunch. Great way to save money, great way to make sure that you're having healthier foods. Also, kind of have double duty on the containers that you're putting things. I love the containers that go from freezer to microwave and things like that you're not dirtying up dishes, because life is too short to spend it washing dishes if you can avoid it. But do remember that there are certain things that don't freeze well. Things like they have mayonnaise, things that are cream, cheeses, like hunks of cheese, they taste okay, but they lose some of their properties. They change when they're frozen. Things that have a high water content don't really freeze well. They're not, say, it's not that they're unsafe, it's just that their consistency don't work out real well. Okay, let's see. Do we have any comments? Anybody we need to comment on any of our recent chats? Leftovers for great concoctions like, oh yes, stews and stir fries. Oh, if you kind of like the end of the day or the end of the week, it's like, what are we having for supper? Oh, we have a little bit of this leftover that. We have a tendency to have, we call it like emergency chicken, which is basically we usually have chicken and then we throw any kind of leftover vegetables we have in it and a can of crushed tomatoes, which I always have in my pantry, and serve it over pasta if we have pasta, or we've had it plain before. That way you're using up your foods, you're having something healthy. Okay, so think about seasonal. All right, are you a seasonal shopper? Because shopping seasonally, A, is a great way to increase your fruit and vegetable intake because you're getting the freshest, tastiest produce, and it encourages you to eat more. And since most of us are here from Florida, I know we always have some out-of-staters on our webinars, but in Florida, look for the Fresh from Florida label in your local grocery store. It supports the local economy, and you're getting food that hasn't been shipped from across the ocean or even across the United States, so it's going to be fresher. You can also go to things like U-Picks, farmers markets, farm stands. So I'm in Central Florida, and at the moment we have tons of blueberries. It's blueberry season, which is one of my favorite times of the year. But we have all kinds of different things. Cucumbers are coming in I mean, we've got a lot of produce coming in. Then they'll hit the summer in Florida, and we don't have a lot of fresh produce in the summer in Florida. We have a lot of okra, but we do have some things. But do think about shopping locally, but going for the fresh things. But also, and some things to think about when you're at your local farm market is people sometimes will say, well, food lasts longer if I buy it there. Or some people say, well, it goes bad sooner. And I've heard both things. Oh, somebody just put about Florida peaches. What about Florida peaches? Are they any good? I had 2 Florida peaches on my cereal this morning, and they were actually from my backyard. But Florida peaches are, Diane, you've hit one of my big things I love. A, you could grow them in your backyard, but do look for them in the store. Florida peaches tend to be a little bit smaller than what we might think of with like Georgia and South Carolina peaches, but they're delicious. They have, so do look for them. You may have some we have some U-Picks in our area, but do look, and if you see them in your store, try them out. Sorry, I went off on my I love peaches segue there, but tangent there. But some things to think about related to varieties in your local market. Generally speaking, your local market or your local farm stand will grow different varieties than what are grown for grocery stores, because grocery stores, they have to ship them across the United States. And they also, in your market, your farm stand's going to pick them when they are at the peak of freshness. So they may not last as long because those varieties may be older varieties and they're grown to be eaten sooner than later. So you might buy a grocery store tomato and a farm stand tomato, and the farm stand tomato, if it manages, in our house it doesn't last long because we eat it, but the variety may go bad first. So make sure that you use them up and just buy them more often. And also we just want to encourage you to take your children to U-Picks and farm stands so they know where their food comes from, because their food does not magically just appear at the grocery store. People grew it. And if you can get them involved in how their food's grown, it'll help them, encourage them to eat more produce. All right, so if you want to find out what's in season, you can go to Fresh from Florida. Or follow Fresh from Florida. It'll show you what's available locally. You can search for farm stands. If you're interested like in blueberries, Florida has a blueberry association where you can find some of their local growers. So do look say they've got some great recipes on the Fresh from Florida as well. And it even depends on when in Florida, where you are in Florida, what's in season. Because blueberries aren't quite in northern Florida yet, but they will be soon. Also, here's another site which is from, what is it, 5 a day? Oh, fruitsandveggiesmore.org has some information, lots of information related to what to do with stuff, storing them, and we forgot to put the link on this one, but it is fruitsandveggiemorematters.org. Okay, so should you stock up and save? Does spending money, getting all your coupons, and buying a lot of things, is it going to save you money? Thank you for putting the link in, Wendy. So, there are all these TV shows that with people hoarding and things like that. So go back to that our number one tip, which was about having a budget, knowing what you're spending and where you're spending it. And so if you're so busy couponing yourself to death and that you're maybe spending money that you think you're going to save money in the future, it can cause overspending, but also people that spend hours and hours a week cutting coupons to buy stuff they didn't necessarily need that they're now filling up their house and their garage and stuff with, could they have been spending more time maybe with their family, doing something productive in another way, things like that. Also, one of the false economies potentially of overstocking is things spoil. Certainly produce, or you may have stuff that you've crammed in the back of your pantry that are past their expiration date. If you have a freezer for all this stuff, or an extra refrigerator for all this stuff that you don't really need, are you saving the money, or are you just paying electricity for it? You forget you have it. I've done that. It's like, oh, I didn't know I bought this. And just having too much stuff in your house, which also goes to wholesale clubs. What do you all think about, our big wholesale clubs? Do you need a pallet of, huge cans of ketchup? How are you going to safely store a huge can of ketchup? So the advantages of wholesale clubs, certainly you can save money on selected items, but impulse buys is one of the disadvantages. They're going around tasting stuff. And also, if you look at the unit price, they're not always a great deal. So just something to think about. All right. And then one of my favorite things to talk about is don't waste money on food you don't eat. How much of you, about a third of our food, this is a great infographic from the USDA, but huge amounts of food goes to waste every year. And so on the left side, it kind of breaks it down. It's got the little chart with the stacks of dollars. Certainly, about 300. Each consumer spends wastes about $370 on food a year, and certainly a third of it or more is on protein foods. We're talking about the cost of them. Things like meat, you bought that fish that you left too long, things like that. So really, the cutting down and looking at things to reduce waste. And this goes to a lot of what we talked about, planning what you're having, making sure that you're storing it correctly. The storage reminders, and we're going to look at a great app in a second, but just being organized and using your food that you have into one thing and using it into another dish if it's left over. And just to remind you, when you're storing leftovers, make sure that you use the proper containers, freezer bags versus like little plastic bags. Freezer bags are for storing food. It keeps it from getting freezer burned. And also, if you cook things and prepare meals and things in the right size, it's going to prevent waste. And I keep a Sharpie in my refrigerator, in a drawer in my kitchen, and I label stuff when I put it in the freezer. I label spices. I label them with the date, just the month and the year. And that way I know how old they are and I can rotate them out. Or if you go to use baking powder like I did and it was 3 years old, you realize you need to go to the store because it was baking soda, excuse me. And I knew it was probably going to be dead. So I went and bought new. And then I didn't waste my ingredients on making bread that didn't work. This is a great handout. I'm just going to skip over it, but this is in your material section. It's also from Nebraska Extension. It's a great handout related to how long to keep things. And then there's an app. There's a new app from the USDA, and it tells you how long to keep different things. And it can set reminders to tell you when to use it as well. Great app. USDA's Food Keeper, and it's free.
And number 10 on our thrifty grocery shopping tips for nutritious foods is getting creative in the kitchen. So if you're stuck in that cooking rut where you're eating the same foods over, or you haven't branched out to try new cooking methods, now's the time to do that. Some examples would be using a slow cooker, a rice cooker, a new method, just something that you haven't been using in the past. Now it's warmer outside. We can get out there and grill a little bit more, enjoy some of the veggies on the grill. But try new recipes, whether it's from your personal cookbook or online. Try new spice herb blends that are salt-free. Even trying recipes from other cultures. I know heart.org has a lot of recipes that are heart healthy that you may find on there as well. So when you have your favorite recipes or you find a recipe, look for ways that you can make some substitutions. I'm just going to show you the one example of swapping out the non-fat Greek yogurt for the sour cream. So just making that simple swap makes it a little bit healthier, and perhaps you have a coupon for Greek yogurt as well. Again, you may have to purchase a nice quality ingredient that might be more expensive. That may have more flavor than, let's say, a less expensive item, but maybe it'll last a little bit longer. So making plans to use that when you do purchase it. So this kind of leads us into, I'm going to go ahead and skip this slide. If you have a favorite ingredient, but type it in the chat box, or a substitution, type it in the chat box. But for time's sake, I want to make sure I give the plug for next month's webinar, which kind of feeds in from our tip number 10, which is new ways to cook, but making more healthy meals at home. So this is going to be on Thursday, May 11th. Get some ideas, ingredient swaps, which we briefly mentioned, and some simple recipes that's going to keep you and your family healthy. So we've covered a lot on our 10 secrets to thrifty grocery shopping, and thanks for typing in the chat box as well. A lot of you gave some great ideas that never crossed my mind, so thanks for sharing, and we hope to see you at the next one. Also, we'll have an evaluation that we'll be sending out shortly after the webinar, but we do have about 2-3 minutes if anybody has any final questions or feedback.
Thank you, Ingrid. And Mona mentioned about the Instapot. That's one of the things that I have not tried yet, but I hear they're really cool. They cook assorted things, lots of different things.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
They're kind of expensive. They're like $100, $120, but if it does multiple things and makes your life easier, that would be one of those things where convenience, the convenience factor of having a $120 appliance might be very useful. Let's see, any other questions? Oh, Mona, $79 on Amazon. So, and do remember, you can download there are links to everything on here are on the slide handout as well as our planning tools and tips.